"Don't you want to try the coffee I made just for you?" James asked, smiling, but something about it felt off. It was our usual brunch at Dana's house. Same table, same setup. We did this once a month, every month. I picked up the mug he handed me and paused. There was a strange metallic smell. My stomach turned. It reminded me of the tea that sent me to urgent care last month, and the breakfast before that. That's when it hit me. What if James wasn't just being thoughtful? What if he was trying to poison me before we dive in? Where are you listening from right now? What's your story? Drop it in the comments. I'll start from the beginning. Because nothing about this story makes sense unless you understand what our family brunches were like. Once a month. Dana, my husband's sister, hosts a full brunch spread at her place. She's the type who plans 3 weeks ahead and uses cloth napkins and printed menus, even when it's just family. Dana lives in Belle Meade, the kind of neighborhood where the mailboxes cost more than my first car. Her kitchen has 2 ovens, 4 coffee makers, and exactly 0 warmth. We'd all sit around her long white dining table, James and I, Dana, sometimes her boyfriend, if she was dating anyone worth showing off that month, and their parents, who always conveniently arrived late enough to miss the awkward part. This brunch was no different. Waffles, smoked salmon, overcooked eggs, polite smiles, except James handed me a mug of coffee with a strange little smirk on his face. "I made this one just for you," he said, tone light, too light. His eyes didn't match his smile. That's what made my stomach turn even before I caught the scent. It wasn't the usual aroma. It was off, kind of sharp and metallic, like old coins and burnt toast. Not spoiled, not bitter, just wrong. I held the cup, nodding like everything was fine, but inside, alarms were going off. I hadn't touched anything yet, but something in me already knew. I'd felt like this before. 3 months ago, after dinner at Dana's, I'd ended up in urgent care with stomach cramps so bad I couldn't stand. 2 months before that, same story, except it was tea, and my throat started closing like I'd had an allergic reaction. Each time, there was no clear diagnosis. The ER doctors chalked it up to food sensitivity or stress. And every time, Dana was right there, insisting she made everything the same way she always did. James always had a quick excuse. "Maybe you ate something earlier that didn't sit well. Could be that new multivitamin. You know how your stomach gets when you're overworked." And I believed him. Or I tried to. Because who wants to believe their husband might be lying to them while they're lying in a hospital bed? I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was imagining patterns that weren't there. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I was just sick. Until that cup of coffee. That morning, Dana was watching me from across the table, absently stirring her own untouched mug with a little silver spoon. "James has been practicing new brewing methods lately," she said, that perfect smile never breaking. "Just for you." It was the way she said "for you" that sent a chill down my spine. James had been spending a lot of time at Dana's place recently, under the excuse that they were planning something for our anniversary. But I'd walked in on too many whispered conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. Too many glimpses of text messages on his phone with her name at the top, then quickly cleared. I didn't have proof, but I had instincts, and sometimes that's enough. So I made a decision. I faked a laugh, picked up the mug, and stood up like I just remembered something. "Oh, shoot," I said. "I need to make a quick work call. Dana, mind if I use your study?" She nodded, barely looking up. As I passed behind her chair, I stumbled. Not by accident. I reached out to catch myself, knocked the edge of the table, just enough to jostle her cup, and in that second, I swapped them, my cup for hers. I apologized with a flustered laugh. I'm such a klutz. She waved it off. Just don't spill anything important in there. I smiled. Of course not. In the study, I left the door open just enough to watch her lift the cup and take a sip. My stomach twisted, not from guilt, from fear, because if what I suspected was true. And then she sipped again. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure: I was done doubting myself. I didn't drink the coffee. Instead, I stood up like I had a work call, walked past Dana's chair, and in one fluid motion, I swapped our mugs. I pretended to trip, made a little show of catching myself, apologized like I always do. Dana didn't even blink. She just gave me that tight, polite smile she always wore when I spoke. I went into her study, door slightly open, and waited. What I was waiting for, I wasn't entirely sure. Proof, relief. A breakdown. I just knew I needed to see what would happen if someone else drank what James had handed me. That metallic smell still clung to my nose. The truth is, this didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building, quietly. The first time was last winter. Dana had made me a cup of tea. Just me, not James, not the others. Said it was a special blend to help with stress. I drank it because I didn't want to be rude. An hour later, I was curled up on the couch in her guest room, nauseous and shaky. She said maybe I skipped breakfast. James said maybe I was getting a bug. I went home, slept it off, didn't think much of it. But it happened again. A few weeks later, same thing, except this time after breakfast. Dana had made omelets. Everyone else seemed fine. I ended up in urgent care. The doctor asked if I'd taken any new medications. I hadn't. James said it was probably just anxiety, that I'd been pushing myself too hard at work. And it's true. Work had been intense. I'd recently landed a huge client account, Henderson Retail Group. It was a massive win for our agency, and apparently a massive loss for Dana. I found out later she'd been pitching to them too, for her firm. I hadn't known that at the time. She didn't show it, at least not in front of me. Dana was always warm on the surface, complimenting my dress, asking about my campaigns, pretending she was happy for me. But little things started stacking up. I'd walk into a room and the conversation would stop. I caught her and James talking in hushed tones more often. He started spending more time over at her place, helping her with design ideas for some anniversary surprise for me. He said, I wanted to believe him, but his texts became shorter. He turned his phone over more, started using AirPods so I couldn't hear his calls. At first, I chalked it up to stress. We were both busy. But then I noticed the pattern. Every time Dana cooked for me, just me, I got sick. Not James, not her boyfriend, just me. There was one time I missed an important meeting because of it. I had a big presentation scheduled for a Monday morning with a prospective client, Johnson & Burke, another huge account, the Sunday before. Dana invited me over for brunch, just me. Said James had an errand, and her boyfriend was out of town. She made lemon scones and herbal tea. I ate, I drank. By midnight, I was in the ER with a 101-degree fever and severe vomiting. I missed the pitch meeting. Dana's firm ended up landing the client. James said maybe it was food poisoning, said I should rest more. That's when I stopped sharing everything with him. Instead, I started documenting things, quietly. I made a spreadsheet on my work laptop dates, times, what I ate, who prepared it, what symptoms followed. I saved receipts, took photos of what was served, started using a backup phone to record conversations when I felt something was off. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to be wrong, But the patterns were too consistent. The Sunday of the coffee incident, I already had a plan in mind. I told myself I'd be careful. I wouldn't eat anything, would only drink water. But James brought me that mug himself, said he'd made it special. And Dana was watching me too closely. Her own mug just sat there, untouched, like it was for decoration. So I switched them, and then I watched. From the edge of the study, heart pounding, palms cold, I watched Dana lift the cup to her mouth. She took a sip, then another. Nothing happened right away. She laughed at something James said, scrolled through her phone, took another drink. But then I saw it, a flicker. Her hand twitched a little as she set the cup down. She blinked hard, like the lights had suddenly gotten too bright. And then she said James's name quietly at first. Then again, louder, James. Something's wrong. I stepped back from the doorway. My hand went to my phone, recording on. I didn't know exactly what I'd catch, but I knew I needed evidence because I wasn't just paranoid anymore. Something real was happening, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. Dana swayed in her chair. One hand gripped the edge of the table, the other clutched her chest. James, she said again, this time her voice cracking. Something's wrong. He looked up from his phone, his smile fading fast. What he said, standing abruptly, what's wrong? Dana was pale. Her eyes were glassy. She tried to push herself up from the table, but her knees buckled. I stepped out from the study doorway. Quiet, deliberate. My phone still recording. That's when I heard James say it. Low, panicked but clear. That wasn't supposed to be your cup. Dana turned toward him, face full of confusion. What did you say? James's eyes met mine. His face went completely still. I didn't flinch. What did you put in the coffee? Dana hissed, voice trembling. She tried to stand again, failed. Her hands were shaking so violently she knocked over a glass of water. I don't know, James stammered. Just enough to make her sick. You said Dana's head whipped toward him. You said it wouldn't be traced. You said it'd just be enough to keep her out of that boardroom. The room went dead quiet. I stepped forward. I already called 911. Dana collapsed. James dropped to his knees beside her, panic fully consuming him now. Dana, stay with me. I didn't speak. I kept filming, because I'd spent too many nights in hospital beds, too many mornings curled around a toilet, wondering why my body was failing me. And now I knew. The ambulance arrived in minutes. I gave them the address calmly, 1542 Maple Grove Drive, told them she was conscious, but seizing. James hovered as they loaded Dana onto the stretcher, his face pale and slick with sweat. I'll go with her. I told the paramedics, she's my sister-in-law. I want to make sure she gets the right treatment. James tried to follow. I turned to him. I'm sure the ER doctors will want to know exactly what was in that coffee, I said flatly. His face crumpled. At the hospital, it was chaos. Nurses rushing around, machines beeping. I sat in the waiting room, still clutching my phone. The recording had picked up every word. A nurse called for family of Dana Caldwell. I stood. I'm her sister-in-law. I said, how is she? She's stabilized, the nurse said, voice calm but serious. But the toxicology results are unusual. The doctor would like to speak with you. They led me down the hall to a private consult room. A woman in a lab coat was waiting Dr. Phillips. Silver hair, steady eyes. Mrs. Monroe, she said, can you walk me through exactly what happened before your sister-in-law became ill? I pulled out my phone. I think you should hear this first. I played the recording. Her expression tightened with every second. This is serious, she said. The substance we found in her blood isn't something you'd find by accident. It's a controlled compound, usually only seen in pharmaceutical testing. That's when James showed up. He stood at the end of the hallway, face white as chalk. "Rachel," he said, "please let me explain." Dr. Phillips pressed the nurse's call button. "Security to room 412, please." James raised his hands, stepping back. "It's not what you think." Dana was confused. She didn't mean I didn't even look at him. I pulled out another phone, my backup, opened the folder labeled Conversations. "These are text messages between James and Dana," I said, showing the doctor. "They talk about making sure I'm out of commission before a client pitch. There's more. Audio files, too." James took a step toward me. "You went through my phone. After I found a vial in your desk drawer," I said. "Yeah, I did." Dr. Phillips nodded slowly. "We'll need to run comparisons between what was found in Dana's blood and your previous hospital records." Security arrived, 2 men in uniform. They stood on either side of James. He didn't resist, just kept saying it wasn't supposed to go this far. I stayed quiet, because he was right. It had gone much further. When Detective Mendoza arrived an hour later, she didn't waste time. She listened to the audio, scrolled through the texts, took notes. "You mentioned previous hospital visits," she said. "Can you walk me through those?" I showed her the spreadsheet. Dates, foods, symptoms. 3 ER trips in 6 months, always after food or drinks prepared by Dana or James. I hesitated, then reached for my purse. I started using a second phone to record them. I said, "Most of it is vague, but there's one clip where Dana says, 'The Henderson account is worth millions. We can't let her ruin this.'" Detective Mendoza's jaw tightened. She looked through the window into Dana's hospital room. "We've already identified substances in her system that don't occur naturally," she said. This was no accident. A commotion down the hall pulled our attention. James was arguing with the security team. "I need to talk to her," he shouted. "You don't understand. We were trying to protect her." Detective Mendoza stepped in. "Mr. Monroe, poisoning someone isn't protection. It's attempted murder." His voice cracked. It was supposed to be mild, just enough to get her to rest. I looked him in the eye. "Then why did Dana say, 'She won't make it to the presentation this time'?" He didn't answer, because the answer was already in the recordings. They weren't just trying to slow me down. They were trying to take me out of the picture entirely. James didn't say another word. The detective ordered his phone to be confiscated. A search warrant was already in motion. By the next morning, they'd searched his office at Dana's firm. What they found made my stomach turn. 3 vials, all labeled with pharmaceutical-grade compounds, not legally available outside clinical research. A small notebook, inside notes in Dana's handwriting, dates, dosages, reactions. There was even a line that said, "Try with tea. Next time coffee might mask less." The toxicology reports from the hospital confirmed everything. Dana had ingested a synthetic compound designed to cause nausea, fatigue, and gastrointestinal distress. The same compound that had been found in trace amounts in my blood work from my previous ER visits. Dr. Phillips compiled a full report linking my symptoms across 6 months to the substances found in Dana's system that day. It was no longer suspicion. It was evidence. The trial started 3 months later. James and Dana were both charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and unlawful possession of controlled substances. The courtroom was cold and clinical, just like the way they had plotted to erase me. I took the stand. I played the audio recordings, the text messages, the spreadsheet, the medical history. Dana sat with her arms crossed through most of it. But when the prosecution showed the photos of the vials and the dosage notebook in her handwriting, her posture changed. James looked at the floor the entire time. He never once looked at me. Dr. Phillips testified next. Her voice was firm, controlled. She walked the court through how the toxins were administered in low enough doses to mimic food poisoning or flu until that last cup of coffee, which contained nearly triple the concentration. If the defendant hadn't consumed the contaminated coffee first, she said, nodding in my direction, the victim likely would have suffered seizures or organ failure within hours, possibly worse. A forensic investigator testified that the substances had been traced back to a friend of James's from college, someone who worked at a pharmaceutical trial facility in Atlanta. That man was already cooperating in exchange for immunity. The prosecution's closing argument was simple. This was a deliberate, methodical attempt to sabotage a woman's life, her health, her career, her future, all in the name of jealousy and professional competition. I didn't cry during the verdict. I just sat there, breathing slowly, while the judge read the sentence. 23 years for James, 28 for Dana, the maximum allowed. They were led out in handcuffs. James glanced back once. Dana didn't. It's been a year since that day. People still ask how I kept it together. I didn't. Not all the time. I went to therapy. I switched firms. I started over, from scratch. But I didn't disappear, and I didn't break. This past fall, I gave the keynote speech at the Nashville Women in Business Conference. It was the exact event Dana used to chase after for years. I stood behind the podium in a navy blazer, looked out at the sea of young professionals, and said, "Success doesn't just attract praise. Sometimes it brings out people's darkest instincts. And when the ones closest to you turn, you have two choices: fall apart or document everything." They laughed a little. I smiled. Then I said, "Integrity isn't just a word on a brochure. It's the thing that will carry you when your world tries to unravel." That night, I got an email from the Henderson client. They were renewing their contract for 3 more years. Their VP added a line at the end. "We've never had more faith in you." I sat with that line for a while, because for a long time, I didn't even trust myself. Now I do. I live in a different part of town now. I make my own coffee. I eat what I cook. I don't attend brunches. And I don't hate James or Dana. I don't waste energy on that. But I'll never put myself in a room like that again, where my instincts scream and I silence them just to be polite. I don't owe anyone that kind of silence ever again. Some betrayals don't come with screaming or slamming doors. They come quietly, one sip at a time, until you finally put the cup down for good.